So here's a wild idea. Can an algorithm really judge a movie? I mean, can it actually understand things like suspense or the chemistry between two actors, or why a certain edit is just genius? Today, we're diving deep into a system that claims it can do exactly that. We're going to see if the promise of an AI film critic actually holds up in the real world.
And you can totally see the appeal, can't you? The idea is so simple. You just upload a video, click a single button, and boom, you get a complete objective analysis. No more endless review meetings, no more arguing over what's subjective and what's not. It's pitched as this pure, data-driven solution.
But this brings up a massive question. I mean, we're not talking about spotting a dent on a car door on an assembly line. We're talking about narrative, emotion, subtext, creativity, the soul of a story. Can a machine, can an algorithm really, truly get that?
All right, so here's our game plan for today. First, we'll look at the big, bold promise behind this AI critic. Then, we're going to peek under the hood and see how the system is supposed to work. After that, and this is the fun part, we'll see what happens when the slick marketing meets a messy reality. And finally, we'll ask the big question: what does it all mean when we let an AI start judging our art?
So this thing is officially called the Trans-AI Video Evaluation System. And its whole purpose, its whole reason for being, is to use generative AI to analyze and score a video based on three key areas: its technical quality, how good its story is, and whether it checks all the boxes for things like compliance.
And here's how it breaks down its final grade. The biggest slice of the pie, at 40%, is story analysis. That's huge. Then you've got the technical quality score, stuff like sharpness, resolution, that makes up 35%. And the last 25% is for everything else, like ethics checks and copyright flags. So that's the what. Now let's get into the how. How on earth does a machine take a movie and spit out a report card?
On the surface, the process sounds pretty simple, right? It's basically 3 steps. First, it just deconstructs the video. It rips it apart into individual frames, it pulls out the dialogue, the music, all the different components. Then it sends those pieces to a whole team of specialized AIs. You've got Whisper for transcribing speech, Gemini for analyzing the scenes, other models checking the image quality, and finally, the system tries to piece all that information back together to figure out the story and slap a final score on it.
And this is where they really try to set themselves apart from something like, ChatGPT. They claim their scoring isn't just a random number, it's based on explainable logic. They promise total transparency, unlike the typical black box where you have no idea what's happening. And they say the whole thing is super customizable for what a client needs. These are some very bold claims.
Okay, so that's the shiny, polished brochure version. It sounds powerful, transparent, sophisticated, amazing, right? But what happens when you look past the marketing? Well, internal discussions tell a much more complicated story.
Because once you get past all the hype, you hit a pretty solid wall. It turns out that teaching a machine to understand nuance and context is, it's really, really hard. And that massive gap between the promise and the actual performance is where things get fascinating. And when you dig into the internal notes, whoa, you find some pretty glaring issues. For example, it completely misses classic AI art mistakes, like a person with 6 fingers on one hand. It can't even spot what the developers themselves call obvious hallucinations, like a drum just floating in the air for no reason. It gets famous people wrong, and this might be the most worrying part. The results are unstable. You can run the same video through it twice and get 2 different scores. It just fundamentally struggles with anything abstract. So you might be thinking, okay, just fix the bugs. But these aren't just simple bugs that you can patch. This points to something much, much deeper. See, an AI can identify the pixels that make up a hand, but it doesn't know what a hand is. It has no concept that humans have 5 fingers, which is why 6 doesn't seem wrong. It sees a drum, but it has 0 real-world knowledge to tell it that drums don't just float. It's missing context, plain and simple. And all of this, it forces us to pull back and ask some much bigger, almost philosophical questions about what these tools are for. I mean, if the AI is supposed to be the judge, who or what is judging the AI? This is an actual quote from an internal meeting. And it's kind of stunning. Remember how transparency was a huge selling point? Well, here, one of the developers suggests doing the exact opposite, keeping it a black box so that people will appreciate it more. It perfectly captures that tension between being honest about an AI's flaws and the pressure to sell a product that feels like pure magic.
You know, these behind-the-scenes conversations also tell us a lot about how AI is evolving in general. For one, AI development follows the hype. When getting good at math is the popular trend, the models get amazing at math. But niche creative analysis? Yeah, not so much. Another thing is that an AI's advice is only ever as good as its training data. So if you want to build an AI that's a great romance critic, you better be ready to feed it thousands of romance novels. Which points to a future where we might see all these specialized AIs, each one tailored to a different taste. So we've come full circle, but with a much clearer picture of the problem. AI tools that judge art. They're not coming, they're already here. But as we've seen, they're flawed, they're biased by the data they're fed, and they can't help but reflect the values of the people who created them. And that leaves us with maybe the most important question of all. As we build these AIs to judge our human creativity, who gets to judge the AI?